You can say hello. Did it go away? I
There
can't.
we go. Good evening to you.
Okay, now I can hear you. How are you? Say hello.
I'm very well. How are you?
Did it go away? I can't.
There we go. Good evening to you.
Okay, now I can hear you.
Oh, let's see. I got your note about the property.
Oh, okay. Well, I just was thinking, suppose there's some payback or some, well, let's give it to the land trust and let them deal with the situation, or let uh,
That could happen.
it's some spite thing, they don't want they think dealing with us is bad, try with, I'm making stuff up, but
Yeah, it could happen. Anything's possible.
well, that's right. I don't, knowing that people are um, crazy sometimes. I just, but I think you can't, I mean, you can't not pursue it. It's just too beautiful of a
Yeah, it's too good.
uh, possibility, but
Yeah.
how'd you get back talking to Mark again?
Not quite sure.
Okay, all right. It's all right. I mean,
No, I mean nothing. I just pick up the phone, say hi, how you doing? What's going on? And then we start chatting. Oh, let's see who's joining us.
How's your garden?
Was destroyed by the woodchucks.
Ah, it's very sad. I have my own battle with Chuck.
Actually, it was a lot of fun watching them. All little babies. There were four
Oh my God.
little babies.
Well, raccoons are renting the ice shed next door again.
Uh,
Last night, something sounded like the battle of Cujo and Wolfman was going on for a while. I didn't know they were there. Whatever it was, then ran across the roof. And then when I shone a light, into the edges, I could see eyes, and eventually a nose popped out. So I think there's a family there.
Hi, David.
Hey, Paul. All right. The speaker's here.
Hey!
Let the games begin.
Yeah, exactly. Well, my lighting. I'm home now in Rhode Island. I
Oh,
came back this morning. Just
oh my.
decided it would be easier to do it from here. So
Okay. Well, glad things are, I guess,
yeah,
something.
sure. Yeah, basically everything is stable. So that's good. Paul, do you know if I share the PowerPoint on the screen, can you see my cursor if I use it like a pointer to wave at parts?
The answer is yes.
Okay, great.
I have to give you permission to share your screen.
Yep.
How do I do that? Oh,
I think
chat.
yeah. There's little dots up in the corner of my picture, I think. If you roll my picture, 3 dots appear in the upper right. Pull that down, and one of them is make host.
No, I'm not going to make you the host.
Oh, allow me to share screen.
Yeah. Oh, I know why I can't. I'm sharing my screen now. Let's see if that changes. Share screen. Oh, here it is. All right, there you go.
All right.
Don't put it up yet because I got to do my thing.
Yeah. No, I'm not going to do it yet.
Okay. Do that, and something, and click that. There we go. How long does it take you to get back from the Cape?
About without traffic, about an hour and 50 minutes. There was no traffic coming off the Cape today, but there was getting down from Providence to Wakefield. There was beach traffic. So
It was hot here today, 90.
yeah, it was hot on the Cape too.
What am I doing? There we go. So I'm a firm believer in starting on time. So
Yep.
30, I'm going to do my thing.
All right.
We are live on YouTube, and folks can see us on Facebook.
Okay. Great.
People are joining us on YouTube. So once we begin, I'll spotlight my video and everyone else will magically disappear.
Okay.
And once I end, I'll get out of here and then I'll introduce you and then give you the proverbial floor.
Okie dokie.
I'll give you the screen.
Right. Yeah, you know, it's a big change from the days when the speaker would arrive and hand you a carousel.
I remember those days. Well, you know what? They are fading. They are fading away. Thank God.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
That was my whole URI tenure there, my career there.
Mm,
My undergraduate and graduate was doing, that's how I partly paid for my existence there.
right. Yeah, I was teaching through graduate school, and so, you know, collecting slides on your subject was what you did. I still have a drawer full, and I would take my Olympus OM1 and my pile of books to the copy stand, and I would copy the slides I needed for the next week's lecture and send them off to A-Bar to be processed. Man,
Very good.
I'm so old.
Oh, God. And I've still got a roll of Kodachrome in the refrigerator. Leave me alone.
Hey, great.
Hasn't been opened. The box hasn't been opened.
Yeah, yeah. You might get some money for that on eBay.
Well, I think there's only, well, I think the last lab, and it was a Kodak lab, discontinued doing that 15 years ago, 10, 12, 15 years ago.
Yeah,
I would make it 1985. That sounds about right.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Those specialty chemicals, they can't easily restart.
2000, that's right. It's like 2000, I'm sorry. It was like 2005 they stopped doing it.
Yeah,
So it was
yeah,
like,
they can't easily restart.
no, it can't. All right, well, I'm going to begin.
All right,
It's that magic hour.
witching hour.
Yep, whoops. What happened? Let's see. There we go. Good evening, everyone. My name is Paul Rosselli, President of the Burrillville Land Trust. I want to welcome you all to something we're calling Invasive Species Got You Down? Well, David Gregg to the rescue. But before we begin, I want to tell you a little bit about the Burrillville Land Trust. The Burrillville Land Trust is a nonprofit private land trust in the town of Burrillville. We've been in existence since the year 2000. We're an all-volunteer public charity. We work with townsfolks on estate planning and a whole bunch of issues when it comes to land use. The mission of the Burrillville Land Trust is to preserve and protect the rural character of the town of Burrillville through education, acquisition, and advocacy. One of those is what we're doing tonight, that is education. Our board members are all volunteers, all volunteer. They come from a variety of backgrounds in education, politics, science, a whole bunch of different backgrounds. Our common belief, or the thing that binds us all together, is the belief that we need to preserve and protect the land around us. Up until just a few weeks ago, we were at about 218 acres, but we gained about 4 acres. Thank you very much. The Burrillville Land Trust holds 222 acres of land. We do events besides the one you're going to see tonight. Our Music at the Farm series is a celebration of music from artists and musicians from all over the world. Come to a place that is deep within the woods, and we listen to some of the beautiful sounds of music in the forest. Also, we used to do these green drink programs, but then this COVID-19 came along and squashed all of that. But hopefully next year, and I do mean next year, 2021, if all goes well, we'll start the green drinks program. Our educational branch of our organization is very robust. We pride ourselves in getting people out into the woods. We've created these posters that that you may see in town every once in a while, called Stories from the Land. Our speaker tonight was instrumental in making sure that we were honest and true to identifying the species as best we could, and naming them in the correct manner on these posters. They've appeared in the library in town, town hall, and a number of other places. And if you ever get to see them, they're stories about landowners who've decided long ago that developing the land was not for them. My own background, I grew up somewhere in the middle between Route 95 and 146 in a house that is there today. The house was built in 1846. It's a 1,200 square foot house, 2 levels, and that's where I grew up. My backyard was my environment, was my place to learn about nature. When I came to the northwest corner of Rhode Island, I wanted more. I wanted more of what I found in my own backyard long ago. That sense of place was key for me, to not only work with the community, but to work with the land, to make sure somehow, some way, it's preserved for eternity. And eternity is a very long time. We can see just how much the land has changed by looking at the land around us. Whenever there's a tree that falls, or is cut down for thinning, when we look at those tree rings, we can tell the wonder about some of the lean years and some of the flush years of growth for that particular tree in that particular place. Imagine being a tree living your whole life in one place. Living in that place, you've discovered a variety of things, and that's what draws us to the land and draws us to preserve and protect it, because every time we turn around, there's something new. These pink earth lichens and these ferns and this rock tripe lichen are examples of the survival and the beauty of things all around us. Even in these vernal pools, if you look close enough, you'll find salamanders. That's our sense of place, and that's why we exist. That is why I hope you're here tonight, to learn a little bit more. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. Our guest tonight is David Gregg. Let me stop this for a second, and I'll introduce David. David Gregg is the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Natural History Survey. He's been director since 2004. An amateur naturalist since his childhood, his formal training is in museum studies and archaeology. He holds a PhD in anthropology from Brown University. David has hosted documentary videos, published on unconventional curriculum archaeology and environmental management, and has taught anthropology and museum studies. He's a board member of the Ralph Waldo Emerson Memorial Association and on the collection committee of the Rhode Island Natural Historical Society. He works hands-on with land stewardship issues on Cape Cod and on his farm in Wakefield, Rhode Island, and has helped the Land Trust in looking at the biodiversity of a particular piece of property that we're interested in. This event tonight is sponsored by the Burrillville Land Trust in association with the Rhode Island Natural History Survey. The event is free. Thank you all for coming. It's paid for by a grant from the New England Grassroots Environmental Fund. So let me get out of this and introduce and spotlight, let's see, there we go, David. And David, if you want to share your screen.
Yep.
And then David, if I can ask everybody two things. One, mute your microphone. And if you have questions, what I suggest you do is use those questions or type in those questions in the chat box. You'll find the chat box somewhere on your screen. And at the end of the presentation, David and I will go through some of the questions and make sure that we get as many answered as possible. This presentation starts at 7:30 and ends at 8:30. So with that, I introduce and welcome David Gregg.
Okay, Paul, are you seeing my first slide? All right. Paul, are you seeing my first slide?
No, not yet.
How about now?
Let me go back. No, I still don't see it.
All right. Hang on. I'm gonna close it. Yeah, let me try this.
Yeah, make sure you're hitting the share screen button and then.
Yep, there's the screen.
Yep, very good. So far, so good.
And now I'm going to start PowerPoint.
Yep. Start her up.
Okay.
And once you get this going, I'll pin your video and then you're good to go.
Right. All right. So are you seeing PowerPoint open?
Yes, I am. So now hit the
present mode. There we go.
Okay, hold on a second.
That's better now. I think.
Good to go.
All right. So thanks very much, Paul, for inviting me to do this. This is a lot of fun. Just really quickly, an outline. I'll do some intros. I'm going to talk a little bit about why this is an important subject for you to listen to. I've got some case studies, my analytical perspective. If you didn't know going into this that I was an anthropologist by training, you will by the time I get done. And a little thoughts, sort of closing thoughts about ecology and plants. And if we have a little time at the end, some questions. So for those of you who are not familiar, the Rhode Island Natural History Survey is a 501c3 nonprofit. A lot of people think that we're a department of the University of Rhode Island or part of Rhode Island DEM, and we're not. The entire support for the Natural History Survey comes from grants, donations, and contracts, and we support DEM and URI in a variety of management and research, but we are an independent organization. Paul's pretty much covered who I am, basics of who I am. I do want to put in a little proviso. I'm not a botanist, and I'm not an ecologist, and I'm not a licensed herbicide applicator. So, you know, a lot of times people come to invasive plant programs because they think I'm going to put up a laundry list of plants and tell you how to tell, you know, this plant from that plant and all that. If you want to do a whole training on how to identify invasive plants and tell them from others, you'll need a real botanist and not me. But I have spent, yeah, as Paul said, about 16 years thinking pretty hard about this and had a lot of experience with it. So hopefully you'll benefit from that. And also, herbicides, I will mention herbicides probably in passing on this. It's not a focus of the presentation. It is illegal to apply herbicides in contradiction to their labeling. So whatever you hear from me, it's informational or entertainment. It's for entertainment purposes, not for herbicide legal purposes. And I did want to start just quickly by putting this slide up, because this is something that DEM and URI are looking for. These are spotted lanternfly, an invasive leafhopper, basically, that came to Pennsylvania and is spreading north. And it has been seen around the Hudson River Valley. And DEM is very anxious to find it, very anxious not to find it in Rhode Island, but if we have to find it soon. So keep your eyes open for this. And if you see spotted lanternfly, it's very distinctive. It's large with these red underwings. Contact DEM at the link here. So of course, we have to have a definition, and this is always kind of stumps people. So the definition of invasive species is it's an organism living and reproducing outside of its natural range, outside of human management, causing harm to native species or natural communities. So Asian longhorn beetle, it's from Asia, it's living here, killing trees, invasive. Snakehead fish, you've probably heard about, definitely invasive. Japanese knotweed, that's invasive. Corn and agricultural crops, not invasive. That is under human management, so they don't count. Dandelion is in a human managed habitat, and it's not really expanding at the expense of anything except grass, and that's not native either. So dandelion, not invasive. Poison ivy. Oh, this stumps a lot of people. Poison ivy is native. You may not like it, but it's not invasive. And catbrier, also not invasive. It is also native and a very important food plant for a whole bunch of insects and mammals and birds. And then there's all the stuff we don't know about. There are lots of things like these hybrid bunch grasses, which are very popular in plant trade. We don't know. We don't know whether they're going to expand outside of our gardens or to push out native species. And so why do we care? This is we have a lot to lose, and I think it's important to be explicit about that as we go along. So this is a picture at the edge of Rodman's Hollow on Block Island. Rodman's Hollow is a globally important habitat for migrating birds, federally endangered burying beetles there, and it has all the grass you see in this picture is Miscanthus sinensis, which has come into a place that should be coastal grassland and shrubland and is turning it into essentially, pampas. So that is a loss of habitat, which is important to us. So this is a loss of value because of invasive plants. And there are rare species, and I tried to pick some rare species that are from the northern tier of the state rather than all coastal. American ginseng, ostrich fern are both rare native plants that are impinged or pushed out of their habitats by invasive plants. And of course, there's loss of recreational opportunities. This is water chestnut growing in Belleville Pond in North Kingstown. Belleville Pond is widely regarded as one of our best fishing ponds in the state, or a very good fishing pond. And nobody's fishing in this the way it looks in this picture. So this is a loss of recreational opportunities, and there's lots and lots of examples of how that comes to be. And then, of course, there's direct damage. This is bamboo on the left and Japanese knotweed on the right. URI had, when I took this picture on the right, URI had just finished paving that parking lot, and at however much it costs to pave a parking lot. And 2 weeks later, the Japanese knotweed pushed right up through the asphalt. So that's a direct cost right there. And so I just point out, the numbers are highly variable, but there's no question that invasive species cost the United States dozens of billions of dollars a year. Some of the estimates are, $135 billion a year. Even if it's half that, it's a 65 billion a year. So it's a serious drag on our economy to have to deal with invasive species. So, and here's something, Paul, you emphasized, sense of place in your introduction, and this I think is really important, and a lot of people miss this. So here's pictures of Rhode Island. Okay, so what do you think of, when you think of Rhode Island? You think about autumn leaves and stone walls and farm fields that sort of roll down to the ocean, at least here in the South, maybe up in the North, they roll down to some more farm fields. But these are really pictures of those things in Rhode Island. So there's a wall behind this pile of bittersweet and in Little Compton, and nobody could ever know there was a stone wall there. There is a stone wall behind this little girl standing next to the knotweed. And this is on Stony Fort Road, just up from URI. There's a stone wall there. So just imagine kids growing up in Rhode Island, they don't have images of stone walls as part of their New England upbringing because they're gone. They're gone not because they got carried away, they just got covered up. So the fact that you are here tonight listening to a talk on invasive species shows that your level of urgency about this has crossed some kind of threshold. So here's a chart that somebody made about how people come to be aware of invasive species. So the up axis is the abundance of the species. So let's say a new species comes in, and of course at first there's one or two, a boy and a girl, or for a plant, I guess, just one. And then they start to grow, but it's still rare enough that nobody really notices. And then it really accelerates. And this is called basically, it's if you use an analogy to epidemiology, which of course we're all doing these days, this is a virgin ground epidemic. This is the plant finds suitable habitat everywhere. It's not hindered or impeded at all by bad habitat. So it just explodes like this. And when it does that, the public finally goes, oh, holy Toledo, where'd that come from? And then but by that point, it's so common, you can't do a sensible reaction to it. It may be too late. So part of the goal of education, like we're doing tonight, is to move your awareness further back down the curve. Here's flattening the curve. We're moving your awareness down the curve. Hopefully it'll increase your awareness. You will start to recognize problems further back down this curve when there are still chances to do things to stop the invasive with reasonable cost and reasonable trouble. So I wanted to give you, I said this is not an ID course. However, we do want to talk about these things and give you some images that you can have in your mind's eye as we talk. And I came up with this list some time ago. I call it the Easy 8. And these are invasive plants 8 invasive plants that meet these criteria. The idea is that anybody without any botanical training should be able to ID these and not make any big mistakes. So they're easy to recognize, and there's no native look-alike. They're commonly encountered in Rhode Island, and they respond reasonably well to basic control techniques. You don't need a PhD in either botany or chemistry to work with these invasives. So we'll run through those really quick. So bittersweet, I'm sure that you're all aware of bittersweet in the landscape. There is a native bittersweet, or there was a native bittersweet back in the day. And there are still sites elsewhere in New England where it occurs. There are no, it's for all intents and purposes, it's extirpated in Rhode Island. And that may be because the invader hybridized with the native and basically swamped its genes. It may be for another reason. It's not entirely clear, but your chance of running into the native bittersweet is in Rhode Island essentially 0. So this is a good target for you to consider. Barberry. Now there are a couple of different barberries. There's European and there's Japanese, and there's hybrids and there's purple and all this stuff. If you see a barberry out in the woods, it doesn't matter which one it is. The chances are it's doing harm to the habitat where it's growing. And winged euonymus, this is burning bush. It's easy to recognize with these wings on the branches, and this red, this compact red form that it has here. Now, sometimes when it's growing out in the deep woods, it gets a little more spindly, like this one that's being pulled out here in this lower right corner. But basically, this is pretty easy to recognize, and there's not much you can mistake it for. And then there's the autumn olive, Russian olive, and shrub honeysuckles. These, once you get your eye dialed in, these are pretty easy. Autumn olive and Russian olive, we don't have anything that looks like them. And the honeysuckles, the shrub honeysuckles, when they're in fruit, they're pretty easy to recognize. Note, I just say really quickly, note on the picture in the bottom left, see how the leaves are opposite each other on the branch? Just note that for a sec. So here's multiflora rose. You're probably familiar with this. When it's blooming, it's just going out of bloom now. It's really easy to tell because those white flowers are really easy to see. But it's got these recurved thorns. The thorns point back down the stem, and it's got this sort of big prominent leaf blade here. So there's that. So here's privet. Look at the upper right corner and see how the leaves come out on either side of the stem like that. That it kind of looks like a herring skeleton or something, a fish skeleton or something. That and actually the bottom right has the same thing. My search image for privet and for those shrub honeysuckles are those paired those leaves in pairs like that going down the stem. I don't know why invasive plants tend to have opposite leaves, but there's a ton of them that do. I'd love to hear some botanical geographer tell me why that is. And garlic mustard. So garlic mustard is unlike the other ones, which were woody shrubs. These are an herbaceous plant. It's a biennial. It grows a rosette like this one on the bottom left the first year. And then the second year it shoots up and it makes these pretty white flowers. But it also grows in a carpet across the forest and becomes, it puts out chemicals from its roots that help to prevent other plants from growing, and it does quite a bit of ecological damage where it becomes established. So and then finally, English ivy and climbing euonymus, or winter creeper. I'm not 100% familiar with how common this is in the northern tier of the state, but down here in Kingston, around Kingston, the trees wearing these fur coats of winter creeper are pretty common. That winter picture there is very common down here. So so all of these 8 plants, I think that's the last one. Yeah. So all of these 8 plants, they respond relatively well to simply being cut off or cut down. We'll talk a little bit about some of the problems with that in a minute, but you can make some headway on a winter creeper problem like this by cutting it off where it goes up the trunk of the tree and just letting it take its course. And one of the things about bittersweet is it tends to produce fruit at the top of the tree. Once it grows up the tree, it produces fruit at the top of the tree so the birds can get it. Well, if you cut that bittersweet vine off at the ground, it will resprout, but it'll take years for it to get back up the tree. You can do 80% of the good by simply a handsaw cutting it off at the ground. And then, if you do use herbicide, you can use the stump paint technique to help to reduce the resprout. But we'll talk about that in a sec. So I also put in the secondary 6. So these are relatively easy to identify, but they're very hard to manage. And the reason I put the secondary 6 in is because they're so hard to manage that if you see one of them, you should get it. You should, it's worth going out of your way to pull up one example, one individual of these things, because they're so hard to control once they become established. So there's swallowwort, and there's a black kind and a pale kind. And again, like the barberries, it's a difference without a distinction, or distinction without a difference. They're a twining milkweed. They're very dangerous for monarch butterflies because monarchs lay their eggs on them. They think they're a suitable host for their larvae. And then the larva comes out of the egg and tries to eat the swallowwort and dies. So swallowwort is a really bad actor. It's wind dispersed like milkweeds. It floats on a little fluffy thing. So they can appear as single plants out in the middle of a field somewhere or in your garden. And this is one to get after. They're very hard to remove once they're established. Japanese knotweed, of course, is very hard to get rid of once it's established. They produce enormous underground tubers. So if you see a little stem of Japanese knotweed, you want to jump on that. Phragmites, of course, is also in that category. Once it's established, it's very hard to get rid of. But it responds relatively well to being pulled up or cut down successively if you see just one or two and you can actually get to it. And Mila-minute vine, I'm not sure. There's a population of Mila-minute vine growing at the intersection of Route 295 and 37. And so you may have it up in the northern part of the state. Mila-minute vine is characterized by these blue berries in a clump, and it's got these perfectly triangular, they're not oblong triangles, they're almost perfectly triangular leaves with these little roundels on the stem. So Mila-minute vine is an annual. And this is another kind of fun thing. It's an annual plant. So if you can stop it from going to seed for 1 year, you're done. Well, there might be a seed bank, but the key is to stop it from seeding. And so again, here's one where if you jump on it, you actually have a pretty good chance. If you miss it, you're in trouble because they're very hard to remove, to find them all once they've started spreading. Glossy buckthorn is another one, very hard to deal with once it's established. The the whole shrub, all the shrubs behind this fence are glossy buckthorn. The characteristic for glossy buckthorn is this orange bark. Interestingly, and this is another one for the botanists to answer, a lot of invasive plants, invasive woody plants have orange under their bark. So bittersweet does, and buckthorn does, and barberry does. So I'm not sure if they're invasive because of the chemical that makes them orange, or it's just a coincidence, but I always thought that was interesting. So if you see bright orange under the bark of something, you might want to look at it twice. Buckthorn is really tough to identify unless you have really dialed your search image in. Now, they have these kind of egg-shaped leaves. This one's glossy. See how it's glossy? Get it? Glossy. They have egg-shaped leaves with these veins forming almost like a peacock feather or a fan, like one of those Polynesian woven palm frond fans, if you've ever seen those. It kind of reminds me of those. And they have the berries are all spread out up and down the stem. Unlike some of our native berries, native berry-bearing shrubs, which tend to have their berries in clumps. So yeah, here's a little bit more about that. The white spots on the bark are the first thing you look at, but we have a couple of native trees, including black cherry, that have those. So then you want to look for that orange bark. You want to look for these. See these leaves? They have those egg shape and those radiating veins. And here, as I said, this is a branch of buckthorn that has the berries all spread along it, and they ripen one after the other, not all at once. Okay, so those are that's the easy 8 and the secondary 6, and I believe that both of those lists are available on the Natural History Survey website, RINHS.org. If you go to, I think you go to the invasive portal, and you'll find information there on the easy 8 and the secondary 6. So how do you get into trouble if you're interested in combating invasives in your yard or in your land trust property or something like that? So here's a patch of horrible invaders. This has got autumn olive, it's got bittersweet, it does have some black cherry. But let's say you've decided you're gonna remove these invaders. So here's the model, right? You've got the plants, and it looks like this. So there it is right there. So you think, all right, we're going to do that. You get everybody all fired up about a big work day, and people bring their chainsaws, and you get the DPW to bring a chipper, and you get 20 volunteers to all come, and you're going to tackle that sucker. And you chainsaw it down, and it looks great. You got it. Except, so here's your stumps, except autumn olive root sprouts like crazy. If you cut an autumn olive off and you don't use any herbicide on the stump, or you don't dig the stump out, it produces root sprouts all over the place. Well, that's okay, you say. We'll get the volunteers to come back with a mower and mow those. Here are the root sprouts. The top one in the winter, that's actually at my house where I learned this lesson. I cut down an autumn olive without painting the stump with an herbicide. And this bottom one is a similar place. You see the stump and you see the sprouts all around it. They come up out of the roots of the plant that you cut down. But now you mow and you've got stumps everywhere. And it's almost impossible to get to all of the resprouts. And so there are a few resprouts left here and there. And within no time, it grows back. And so it's easy to get excited about a big, tough, attack, but without thinking about the long-term consequences of that. So here's some of my analysis. So here's a graph with time going from left to right. and your goal is on the right. In a lot of cases, and this is whether you're dealing with your personal piece of property or a land trust property, the vigorousness of effort starts very high because everybody's fired up. And then over time, the vigorousness of your effort tapers away. At the same time, the plants are resprouting, the stumps are in the way of a mower. You've created openings for more invasives to come in. So the chance of problems goes up. And this is, you can see that this is a recipe for disaster. So I tried this graph is it's a little arcane, but see if you can follow it. So I did a little thought experiment. So let's say you have your volunteer, you regularly get 10 volunteers to a land trust workday. And you do work days, 4 times a year. So that means you've got 40 person days to use for removing invasives, let's say. So, but maybe the first one, everybody's very excited. So you've got double, let's say you've got 80 person days the first time to work on this. The purple line and the red line is the line of the square footage that you can clear. So you can see when the purple line is high, the effort you have is high, you get a lot of acreage clear. But the trick is the green line. The green line is the amount of maintenance needed. And of course, that first year, you got lots of excitement and you have no maintenance requirements. So you get tons clear. And the more you clear, the higher your maintenance will be in successive years. So if you play this out for 10 years, you have less and less time to clear additional land because all of your available manpower, all your 40 person days is being consumed simply keeping what you already cleared open. So you kind of come up against this natural limit where you can't clear anymore. And I did look at, I did this experiment. So this is if you can maintain effort at an even pace or more or less even pace, instead of doing a ha-ha and then tapering off, you keep it even. You actually get more land open at the end of 10 years, end of 25 years, sorry, 25 years. So if you look at the previous graph, same amount of effort over a 25-year period, you spent, you wanted to keep 10 acres open or 10 units open. You spent 169 person units to clear 10 acres and keep it open. Whereas if you hold your effort constant over that time, you actually takes less effort to keep the same number of acres clear. So this is just a way of kind of gaming it out and thinking about how important concerted effort over time is. Because remember, if you're a person fighting an invasive plant, you're essentially a biocontrol for that plant. It's like you bring in, a beetle that eats the plant. You're the beetle. And so, like happens when you bring in a biocontrol, so the top line is whatever, this top line is the population of the invader. The bottom line is the population of the control, whatever's going to eat it, the natural enemy that you've brought in. So you see that the target gets more and more populous, and the predator grows and grows and grows, and then of course the population of the host crashes, and so does the population of the predator. So think about this in the terms we've just been discussing. The top line is the invasive species. The bottom line is your energy. And so the invasive species, you come in, you get excited, you kill it. The invasive species goes way down and your effort goes way down. And then the invader comes back. And then you try to get excited about it, but you're not very effective. And in the end, you reach an equilibrium with the invader. And that's what I tried to show in that 25-year model, that you will reach an equilibrium with the invader that you're working on. And so you have to think where do I want to stop? Before you start, you have to recognize that you will end up in an equilibrium with it, and you have to pick where you're going to stop. So I did this. This is another little model I did. This is the number of people involved. So imagine yourself in a land trust thinking about how many people can I get involved and how much stuff do I have to work on this project. So if you think about the bottom of this axis is armed with clippers and determination, and the top is, 2 botany professors on the board, and the Army Corps of Engineers owes us a favor. And this one is, me and a friend, or half the town turned out for the workday. And so if you have no materials at all you got is clippers, you can do these, you can plan to do these things with invasives. You could do a lot of swallowwort. You should not try to do early detection of new species. That's technically difficult and requires lots of people and lots of expertise, and you don't have that. Major land clearing requires both. You need a lot of people and you need a lot of stuff. And so this is a little model I did that shows that. You can play it out depending on what you feel you are able to commit to an invasive control effort. So let's boil it down. When you set out to manage an invasive plant, whether that's on your own property or on land trust property or the school where you're doing a pollinator garden or what have you, you have to be explicit about your purpose for tackling this. Is it unsightly? Is it killing a rare species? Is it interfering with your goose hunting blind? Specifically, as specific as you can be, why are you doing this? And then you need to manage all of the impacts. I'll close with this in a sec, but you need to manage all the impacts on the value you're targeting. The invader may be only one, the invasive plant may be only one of the things that's impairing that thing you love. So if all you do is tackle the invasive plant, you're still not going to get the value out of it that you want. Plan intermediate goals. Be realistic about your own capacity. If you do a work day and you get 3 people whose average age is 89, there's things you just can't do. Which invasive plant exactly are you tackling? Because each plant has an approach that works best. Use your tools correctly. If you are using herbicide, use the right herbicide. Don't use a herbicide that works best in the fall in the spring. You'd be surprised how many people mix them up. And plan for a long tail. That is, you might get a big bang at the beginning, but know that in advance that you will have years of going out there with clippers and finding and clipping root sprouts. So finally, treat your site as a system. So this is a forest. This is actually at Norman Bird Sanctuary. Norman Bird Sanctuary is an ecological wreckage because of invasive species. And we've been working there for a number of years to try to change that. But when you look at the forest, you can't just go in there and say, I want to change, this one invasive plant. You have to think about putting in some native plants to replace it. You have to think about succession. The dead trees in this picture are red cedars because this used to be a pasture. So the forest is changing anyway. So you have to think about it as a system. It has invasive plants in it, but that's only part of what's happening. And there are many other things that affect your the values you're trying to save. Misuse by humans, drinking water withdrawals, earthworms, and of course, deer. I can't emphasize enough the impact of deer in our ecosystems, and the deer eat everything except the invasive. So of course you end up with more invasives. Now I'm going to show you a series of photographs that were taken by this trail camera at Alton Jones, at a place where there used to be a lot of rare plants, and see if you can figure out why there aren't any rare plants there anymore. So imagine this happened 3 times a day. A herd of 5 deer walked back and forth in front of this camera looking for stuff to eat. There is no way that a plant that's palatable to a deer is going to survive at that site. Deer are a big deal. Tom Rowinski, he's a botanist who works for the U.S. Forest Service, has done a lot of work in Rhode Island, and he's come up with this assessment for deer impact called the 10 tallest. And you measure the 10 tallest, you find the 10 tallest plants in a particular patch of forest, and you rank them for how much deer damage they have. And this picture here at the bottom has a nibble on the branches. So you keep doing this over time, and you develop a picture of how much deer damage, how much of the height of the plants is because of deer. It's pretty cool. If you Google 10 tallest deer assessment, you'll probably get Tom Rowinski's deer assessment tool. And we can probably, the Natural History Survey can probably help people interested in doing the 10 tallest method. It's sort of a community science kind of thing that you can do with a little bit of preparation. Of course, deer management, you can look at the hunting pressure on your piece of land. You could also do tree tubes. These are tree tubes to try to get the deer to stop eating the trees. And you can actually do little tiny fences. This is just a roll of 4-foot goat wire that we've put with some bamboo posts in the forest. And this is not a Photoshop deer. This is a deer looking into this fence and caught on a camera, thinking, now how am I going to get in there? You people, you can also do bigger exclosures. This is an exclosure that we built out in Alton Jones to try to demonstrate for people how big the deer impact was. Deer exclosures are very expensive, but they're the gold standard for ecological restoration. So the deer mitigation pyramid includes all of these things. Planting the right plants, hunting, repellents, brush piles. You pile brush around loosely, and the deer, the trees grow up through it. And the deer can't get in there because of the brush. Tree tubes, small fences, and big fences. So the thing to remember is, if you're feeling discouraged about all those graphs and all that work involved for 25 years into the future, invasive plants are just plants. They're not space aliens. They're not immortal zombies. And we know how to kill plants. You can pull them up. You can torture them to death by clipping them off every day when you walk by. I always tell people, you can kill any invasive plant if it's growing between your front door and your car, because you go by it 6 times a day. If you see a little leaf coming out, you lean over and you pick it off, and that'll kill it. They're just plants. So you'll be able to figure it out. It might be harder than you think. And I put up this invasive.org website. It's a place I go to for all kinds of things. Mostly they have photographs, so that like a lot of the photographs that I've used in this presentation come from, the ones that aren't mine come from there. But they also have fact sheets, and they've got links to different kinds of protocols for herbicides and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. And this is in the way of saying that these are just plants. This is a knotweed. This is at my house. It came in with a truckload of composted cow manure. The farmer must have had knotweed growing in his manure pile, and he shipped me some. Gosh darn it! But you can see this is the fragment that was broken off in his manure pile, and it tried to sprout 3 different times. See, it sprouted once on the left end, and I picked that off. I pulled it off, and it sprouted again from the middle node, and it got to here, and I picked it off, and it grew another one. So I said, gosh darn it, and I dug it out. And there it is, this chunk and 3 different sprouts. So, you know, you just have to, that's basic plant stuff. That's the same way you propagate horseradish. So, you know, you just got to treat it like a plant. And about that, these are your 3 most important invasive plant management tools. I carry a pruning saw and clippers and gloves in my car. I carry them in the pocket of my coat wherever I go. You can do an enormous amount of good. You might not, like I said at the beginning with that bittersweet vine, you might not kill it, but you will reduce the amount of seed it produces by orders of magnitude. It takes 2 seconds. You literally lean down with that brush saw and cut it off, and you've done an enormously valuable thing. So invasive management is, you know, good planning for sure, but persistence. And I know, Paul, that you sort of characterize this as like how to win when you're, you know, when you're frustrated with the battle. But I try to say that only 20% of it is battling. And also, if you think about it, good planning and persistence, you don't need to be a PhD in botany or a PhD in chemistry to plan well. You come to talks like this, and you read resources online that you can easily find, and you know how to plan. You plan all kinds of stuff, and then you persist because you care about the resource that you're trying to save. You've been explicit about what you're trying to do, and you care about that a lot, and so you persist. And so that is how you become empowered about invasive plants instead of disempowered by confusion or technical mumbo jumbo or what have you. So that's what I have to say. And I know that Paul said that we could try a few questions. I don't know whether you want to take some chat questions, or anybody has any questions.
Sure.
Go ahead.
David, why don't you stop sharing your screen?
Yeah.
And we can open up the floor. So I've posted a few questions in the chat box. You can take a look at that. Yeah, so just stop sharing your screen.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep.
So do you see the questions in the chat box?
Yeah, let me just get that open. Yeah. What do you mean doing harm to the environment around the invasive? So is that question about, well, there's 2 ways to look at that. One is the invasive is harming the environment around it. That's in the definition. So when Phragmites grows around the edge of a salt pond, it excludes native birds. It shades out native plants. It deposits organic matter into the water and changes the water chemistry. So those are all harms that we use to define invasive plants. I mean, a dandelion growing at the edge of your lawn isn't harming anything except your lawn. The other way to look at it is doing harm around the invasives. You do have to expect that if you control invasives with mowers and chainsaws and chippers and herbicides, it's going to look a little rough at first. So, you know, that you have to think, you know, if anybody has experience cutting down an autumn olive tree, what's under an autumn olive after you've cut it down and pulled it away? Nothing. It's just dirt. And so you do have to think about what's your plan for that, because the only thing that's under an autumn olive tree is dirt and autumn olive seeds. So yeah. when you say cut it down, is there any advantage to digging it up instead of cutting it down? So a lot of the things that we've talked about tonight are woody shrubs, and um, I, well, honeysuckle, shrub honeysuckle is, and multiflora rose are both moderately easy to pull out by the roots. If you have access to a tractor or something like that, or for small plants, you use the weed pullers that people have. If you can pull it out from the roots, that's better. But autumn olive is not going to be pulled out without a backhoe. So that's out of the question. And so an example of an autumn olive treatment, which I do here, and again, this is for entertainment purposes only, consult a real herbicide applicator, but cut it off at as low as you can get it. Ground level is best, and that's about that mower. If you leave a bunch of stumps around, you're only making life harder for yourself. So cut things down to ground level so that you at least have the option of mowing later. Cut it off at ground level, paint the stump with an herbicide that is in a formulation and a concentration that is labeled for that use to stop the root sprouts. And typically that would be a glyphosate. You'd use a glyphosate, and glyphosate is a autumn herbicide. It's much more effective used in August and September and October. So at least here I use, if I'm cutting down woody shrubs, I do it in the autumn. And then what are some maintenance techniques? So, well, a lot of people think they're going to mow. And after you've gone in, let's say, even if you brought in a brush hog or something really dramatic at first to smash stuff down, you expect that you're going to mow to control the resprouts. But mowing in New England is murder on equipment. It's such stony ground, and even if you've been good about getting the stumps out, and it's uneven, and mowing is hard work. And if your land trust volunteers are all in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, man, mowing is tough, and paying someone to mow is super expensive. So there's mowing. I do a lot of work with a brush cutter, with one of those pole mount, one of those things with the handlebars and the saw blade on the end of a stick, circular saw blade on the end of a stick. That's pretty good, but again, there's a limit to the number of acres you can cover with that. And that's, again, think about keeping your effort even. In the long run, it's gonna get more acres cleared with the same effort, or clear more acres with less cumulative effort if you keep your effort even, rather than a big spike and then everybody gets sick of it and leaves. Yeah, and then PowerPoint. Yeah, I can make these PowerPoint slides available, Paul, in some form or other.
Sure. The presentation was recorded, and we can talk about where that's going to go a little later.
Oh, okay, great.
And YouTube automatically records it as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Great. The question about purple loosestrife. There were two beetles that were released that are biocontrols for purple loosestrife. And as I said, biocontrol doesn't eliminate the invader. It just creates an equilibrium that's lower than it was before. So those two there were actually two insects, I believe a root feeder and I think a stem feeder. And purple loosestrife, the amount of purple loosestrife in our environment is way down. But it still cycles. So, purple loosestrife goes up, the beetles go up. But then the purple loosestrife all gets eaten, and the beetles are sitting around starving, so they all die. And then that gives the purple loosestrife a chance to come back up again. So the purple loosestrife beetles should follow my advice and keep their effort even over a long period of time.
Well, we'll be sure to tell them that. We have time for one more question right at the end, and then we're done. So, David, you got one more.
Am I experienced using microchipping? Found it to be effective. Microchip. Oh, that's probably referring to leaving the chipping material on site to improve the nutrients or what have you. I am not very familiar with that. I know that initially woody chips remove nitrogen from the soil, but in the long run increase it. But I'm not really very familiar with that. There's a bit going on with chips. You have to kind of look at the technical literature on that.
We are at the end of our time for tonight. I'm again a firm believer. I'm starting on time and ending on time. David, I want to thank you so much. Thank you for a great presentation. Oh, now I want to get out there and start doing something.
Yeah, just get those clippers and that saw in your car.
Maybe a pair of gloves, and you've encouraged me to get out there and do it.
Just do it.
Thank you so much, David. Gregg from the Rhode Island Natural History Survey. Thank you all for attending. This presentation is sponsored by the Burrillville Land Trust, along with the Rhode Island Natural History Survey, and it was funded by the Grassroots Environmental Fund. Thanks again, David. Thanks for all who attended. See you next time.
Thanks, Paul.
All right.